On Saturday night, March 8, 2026, Iran launched Khabar Shikan ballistic missiles directly at the Bazan oil refinery sitting inside Haifa Bay. That is the single largest oil processing facility in the entire state of Israel. It supplies more than half of the country's total fuel. The IRGC published their strike confirmation within minutes of impact. Their message was stripped down to its core. You burned our refinery, we burn yours. This was the 27th wave of Operation True Promise 4, a precisely timed retaliatory strike that landed within minutes of Israeli warplanes hitting fuel depots inside southern Throne for the first time in this war. Iran watched its own oil infrastructure collapse on live broadcast footage. And within minutes, Iran fired ballistic missiles directly at the facility that keeps Israeli fighter jets airborne, their military convoys moving, and their power grids operational. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through exactly how Iran struck Israel's largest oil refinery, why the Khabar Shikan missile is an engineering problem for every air defense system on Earth, and where this war is heading next. Before we continue, I want to say thank you for being here. Your support is what makes this channel possible, and I genuinely mean that. Make sure you subscribe and hit like so I can keep delivering these critical updates directly to you. Here's what actually happened. Israel struck oil infrastructure inside Iran for the first time since this war began. The IDF framed it carefully, stating it had hit fuel sites supplying both civilian and military consumers. That framing matters. We will come back to it. Fires erupted across oil depots in Thran and Alborz provinces. Footage from the Chitgar depot on the western outskirts of Thran showed a wall of flame visible for kilometers in every direction. CNN geolocated a separate fire burning near a fuel storage site in the northeast of the city. By morning, residents across multiple neighborhoods were reporting something nobody wanted to see. Black rain. Real black rain. Soot from the burning oil had mixed with atmospheric moisture and was falling as dark water across entire city blocks. The IRGC published its response through SIPA News within minutes of the Haifa strike. The exact statement read, "In response to the targeting of the Throne refinery, we have just targeted the Haifa refinery. The weapon system confirmed was the Khabar Shikan. The strike was logged as the 27th wave of Operation True Promise 4. And we need to stop right here and talk about why that specific missile was selected. Because the engineering inside the Khabar Shikan is the single reason Iran has been able to sustain 29 waves of missile operations across 9 straight days of bombardment from two of the most advanced and well-udended militaries on the planet. The Khabar Shikan is a third-generation solid-fuel medium-range ballistic missile operated by the IRGC Aerospace Force. It was first publicly revealed in February 2022 during ceremonies marking the 43rd anniversary of the Iranian Revolution. The name itself translates to Breaker of Kheibar, a deliberate callback to the 7th century battle in which Muslim forces conquered a heavily fortified Jewish settlement near Medina. The ideological signal built into that naming is not accidental. It is intentional, down to the syllable. The missile measures 11.4 meters in length, with a diameter of 0.76 meters. Launch weight sits somewhere between 4.5 and 6.3 tons, depending on payload configuration. The warhead carries roughly 550 kilograms of high explosive. The official range is listed at 1,250 kilometers, far enough to reach deep inside Israeli territory from launch positions in western Iran. An upgraded variant designated Kheibar Shekan 2 reportedly extends that range envelope out to 1,800 kilometers. But range is not the story that matters here. The story that matters is the fuel. Older Iranian missile systems like the Shahab series ran on liquid propellant. Liquid fuel means hours of exposed preparation time, sitting on an open launch pad. That is a massive vulnerability window where surveillance satellites, reconnaissance drones, and signals intelligence teams can locate, track, and destroy the launcher before it ever fires. The Kheibar completely eliminated that problem. Solid fuel means the missile can sit loaded, hidden, stored on a 10-wheel commercial truck chassis that looks identical to a civilian cargo vehicle, and fire within minutes of receiving the launch order. Iranian state sources have stated that preparation time dropped by a factor of 6 compared to its liquid fuel predecessors. That single engineering decision is the entire reason Iran has maintained 29 waves of missile operations across 9 days without exhausting its mobile launcher inventory. You cannot destroy what you cannot find. You cannot find what looks like a freight truck parked inside a warehouse on a highway industrial strip. The warhead is a maneuverable re-entry vehicle built on a triconic airframe designed to hold stability during aggressive terminal phase corrections. It carries satellite-aided guidance with the documented capability to actively adjust its flight path all the way to the moment of detonation. Terminal velocity estimates vary across open sources. Some reports place it at Mach 2 to 3 on final approach. Others put the figure somewhere between Mach 7 and Mach 10. That gap alone is significant. It suggests either deliberate ambiguity from Iranian sources to complicate Israeli defense planning, or genuine uncertainty inside Western intelligence assessments about this system's actual performance envelope. Either way, this missile was specifically engineered to defeat layered air defense architectures from the ground up. And we will come back to whether those defenses held at Haifa, because as of right now, neither government has given anyone a straight answer. Now consider the target. The Bison Group oil refinery in Haifa Bay is not just an industrial facility. It is the single largest oil processing complex in the entire country. It sits on 526 acres, roughly 2 kilometers from residential neighborhoods, in one of Israel's most densely populated coastal corridors. It processes imported crude and supplies between 50 and 60% of Israel's total domestic fuel requirements. Diesel for ground transportation, gasoline, kerosene used for jet fuel, cooking gas for civilian households. Israel operates only one other refinery, the Paz oil plant in Ashdod, running at 110,000 barrels per day. If Bazan goes offline for any extended duration, there is no domestic backup capable of closing that gap. Not even close. Most people assume Israel's energy security rests on its celebrated natural gas discoveries in the eastern Mediterranean. What those people do not understand is that those offshore gas fields, Leviathan and Karish, were already shut down as a precautionary measure when this war began on February 28th. Gas exports to Egypt were almost certainly halted at the same time. So when the Khabar Shikan missiles arrived over Haifa Bay on Saturday night, Israel's energy infrastructure was already running in emergency conservation mode before a single warhead made impact. And this was not Iran's first attempt at this specific target. In June 2025, during the 12-day war between Israel and Iran, that same Bison complex took a direct hit. 3 employees were killed in that strike. The on-site power station that generates steam and electricity for refinery operations was severely damaged. All facilities were shut down. Bison disclosed the damage through a formal filing to the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. Trading in Bison shares was immediately suspended. The Israeli Energy Ministry estimated a minimum of 2 weeks to restore basic operational capacity. Pipeline systems, transmission lines, and downstream processing units all sustained documented damage. The refinery eventually came back online, but the vulnerability had been exposed and cataloged for the entire world to study. So, when the IRGC launched Khabar Shikan missiles at the exact same complex 9 months later, they were not guessing. They were returning to a target with a confirmed penetration record. As of this moment, Israeli military sources have neither confirmed nor denied the specific extent of damage from the March 8th attack. That pattern mirrors June 2025 almost perfectly, when it took days for the full picture to surface through stock exchange filings and energy ministry assessments. If the damage follows the same trajectory as last time, expect a quiet Bison disclosure to the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange within the next 48 to 72 hours. Stay with me because the refinery strike is not an isolated event. It is one calculated note inside a rapidly expanding energy war that is actively reshaping the global economy in real time. This entire escalation began on February 28th, when the United States and Israel launched coordinated strikes against Iran under the operational designation Epic Fury. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed in those initial strikes, along with family members, senior military commanders, and civilian casualties. More than 2,000 strikes were executed across at least 26 of Iran's 31 provinces during the opening days alone. As of day 9, the Iranian Red Crescent had reported at least 1,332 Iranians killed, including 194 children. In Lebanon, Israeli strikes killed 123 people and displaced 95,000 more. 7 American service members are confirmed dead. A strike on a primary school killed at least 160 people, the vast majority of them girls between the ages of 7 and 12. UNESCO described it as a grave violation of humanitarian law. Human Rights Watch publicly called for a formal war crimes investigation. Iran's response has been unrelenting. By March 5th, the IRGC reported launching over 500 ballistic and naval missiles and nearly 2,000 drones since the war began. 40% directed at Israeli targets, 60% aimed at American assets across the broader region. The IRGC openly stated that it considers the United States the primary adversary in this conflict and has specifically prioritized American military assets for punishment. Confirmed targets have included Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Beersheba, the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, a destroyer operating in the Indian Ocean, the 5th Fleet Headquarters in Bahrain, Al-Ud Air Base in Qatar, Al-Afra in the UAE, and Sheikh Issa Air Base. Before this segment ends, I will show you exactly why the tempo of these waves matters more than any single individual strike, because the math does not add up the way either side is telling you it does. The Strait of Hormuz is where this story stops being regional and becomes a genuine global crisis. An IRGC commander stated publicly that the strait was closed and that any vessel attempting transit would be set on fire. Tanker traffic collapsed from an average of over 100 total vessels per day down to just 4 on March 1st. 3 of those 4 were flying Iranian flags. By midweek, transit had effectively dropped to 0 for any commercial ship not flagged by Iran or China. More than 150 commercial vessels sat anchored outside the strait, unable or unwilling to cross. On March 5th, the IRGC refined its position. The closure applied specifically to ships with any commercial or logistical link to the United States, Israel, or Western allied nations. Chinese-owned vessels were transiting without interference. One bulk carrier, the Iron Maiden, sailed directly through the strait while broadcasting the words "China owner" on open maritime radio channels. A Turkish tanker identified itself as Muslim-owned and Turkish-operated and passed without incident. 20 million barrels of oil move through that strait every single day. That represents roughly 1 point of total global oil supply. 84% of the crude flowing through the Hormuz corridor is destined for Asian markets. China, India, Japan, and South Korea together account for 69% of all shipments moving through that choke point. Only 4.2 million barrels per day can physically be rerouted through existing bypass infrastructure, the Saudi East-West pipeline and the UAE's Fujairah pipeline. That leaves approximately 16 million barrels per day exposed if the closure holds. Brent crude surged from roughly $70 before the war opened to above $92 by Friday, March 7th. That is a 27% weekly gain. By Sunday evening, Brent crossed $100 a barrel for the first time since 2022 and kept climbing past $17. U.S. crude briefly touched $100 as well. Goldman Sachs raised its second quarter oil price forecast by $10 and issued a warning that 5 sustained weeks of Hormuz disruption could push prices well past $100 per barrel. American gasoline hit $341 per gallon, up 43 cents in a single week. Goldman estimated traders were already pricing in a $14 per barrel risk premium based purely on the probability of continued closure. And the energy damage is not limited to the strait. Saudi Arabia intercepted 20 drones targeting Aramco's Shaba oil field. The Ras Tanura refinery, processing 550,000 barrels per day, sustained limited damage from interception debris. Bahrain's Sitra refinery was targeted. Fujairah port storage facilities in the UAE were struck. Oman's DQM port took fire. Kuwait halted crude production entirely, reduced refinery throughput across all facilities, and declared force majeure on all oil export contracts. 2 people were killed inside Saudi Arabia, the first confirmed Saudi fatalities of this entire war. Qatar, the world's largest exporter of liquefied natural gas, shut down all gas production on March 2nd and declared force majeure on LNG contracts 2 days later. Qatar's energy minister warned publicly that if the fighting continues, every Gulf producer could be forced to suspend exports entirely. His exact framing was direct. This will bring down economies of the world. European natural gas futures surged more than 50% in 48 hours before partially pulling back. Most people watching this are still processing this as a regional conflict between Iran and Israel. What it actually is an energy war with a blast radius that reaches every gas station, every shipping lane, and every central bank on Earth. Now here is where the political layer fractures completely. Donald Trump demanded unconditional surrender from Iran. He told the public the war would continue for a little while and stated directly that he was not concerned about rising gasoline prices. The White House projected 4 to 6 weeks to achieve its stated military objectives. When reporters pressed him about the closed strait, Trump said it was the ship's choice to avoid transit and claimed that Washington had effectively wiped out Iran's navy. On March 8th, Iran's Assembly of Experts elected Moshtaba Kham, the dead supreme leader's son, as his successor. The IRGC and Iran's entire senior leadership pledged immediate allegiance. Trump publicly called him a lightweight and suggested he would not last long, but the regime did not fracture. The chain of command held. A new supreme leader was installed and seated within 8 days of the assassination. The missile waves never stopped. And here is the contradiction that nobody inside Washington is willing to address on the record. The Washington Post revealed a pre-war intelligence assessment from the U.S. National Intelligence Council, concluding that a large-scale military assault on Iran was unlikely to topple the government. The same document described the possibility of Iran's fragmented opposition seizing power as unlikely. Whether the president reviewed that assessment before authorizing the strikes remains an open question. What is not an open question is the outcome. 9 days in, 29 waves of retaliation, a new supreme leader formally seated. The IRGC command structure intact and operational. Iranian President Pezeshkian publicly stated that Iran will not capitulate under any condition. The wave tempo tells the real story. Analysts noted that Iran's ballistic missile launch rate showed a decline between day 1 and day 4, which some interpreted as either stockpile depletion or a deliberate rationing strategy for a prolonged campaign. But then waves 25 through 29 arrived in rapid succession, each deploying entirely different weapon systems. Khabar, Shikan, Fatah, Imad, Khorramshahr, 4, and a previously undocumented system designated Edimad. Either Iran holds deeper reserves than any external estimate had projected, or it is deliberately burning through remaining high-end inventory in a calculated final escalation surge. Neither answer is reassuring, and neither answer points toward a war that is approaching its conclusion. Share this with every person you know who still believes this situation is under control. Saturday night, both sides struck each other's oil infrastructure within the same hour. The Haifa Refinery, supplying more than half of Israel's total fuel, was hit with precision-guided ballistic missiles for the second time in 9 months. The Strait of Hormuz is functionally closed to all Western commercial shipping. Oil has gained more than 40% since this war opened and crossed $100 a barrel on global markets. Qatar has declared force majeure on its global gas contracts. Kuwait has halted all exports. 7 Americans are confirmed dead. Over 2,300 Iranians are confirmed dead. A new supreme leader is seated in Tehran, and not one of the governments involved in this conflict, not Washington, not Tehran, not Jerusalem, has articulated what an acceptable end to this war actually looks like. That is not a war with an exit strategy. That is a war running entirely on momentum, and momentum does not negotiate.